For most of his life, Willie Nelson was the voice of peace, the gentle outlaw, the calm storm, the man who turned pain into poetry. They called him the Buddha of country music, the soul who never carried hate. But that story's only half true. At 92, Willie Nelson is not preaching forgiveness anymore. He is remembering names, 7 of them, 7 artists who broke the bond, mocked his faith, or turned brotherhood into silence. Legends he once loved, friends he once trusted, and one name so unexpected it still shakes Nashville to this day. For the first time, the man who forgave everyone is drawing a line. He is not chasing revenge. He is telling the truth about loyalty, pride, and the cost of standing alone. Because even the calmest heart can still burn when pushed too far. So stay with me as we uncover the 7 names Willie Nelson never forgot. And before we begin, tell me something. What time is it where you are watching right now? Are you ending your night or starting your day? Type your answer in the comments and make sure to subscribe because this story is only just beginning. The first man on Willie Nelson's list was not a villain. He was a giant, a man whose name filled every billboard, whose face was printed on millions of tickets. Garth Brooks, the man who sold more than 170 million records and made country music louder, brighter, and bigger than ever before. To the world, he was a hero. To Willie, he was the warning sign that something sacred had been lost. In the late 1990s, Willie was still driving through small towns, playing dusty county fairs where the air smelled like hay and diesel. He would sit with his guitar trigger, the wood worn thin from decades of songs. His audiences were small, a few hundred people at best, but every chord came from somewhere real. Meanwhile, Garth Brooks was packing football stadiums with 70,000 fans. He flew across arenas on cables, surrounded by lasers and fireworks. The crowd screamed his name. To them, it was a miracle of entertainment. To Willie, it looked like a funeral for authenticity. He once told a friend on the tour bus that you cannot sell struggle if you have never bled for it. That was his code. Country music was not about perfection. It was about pain, dust, and honesty. Every song should carry the weight of a hard life. Willie's voice cracked because life had cracked him. Garth's voice, he thought, was polished smooth by money. The difference was not skill, it was soul. Willie never envied him. He had already lived through fame, fortune, and failure. But what he saw in Garth Brooks disturbed him. It was country music without a heartbeat. Brooks turned heartbreak into a brand. He sold emotions like souvenirs, wrapped in smoke and stage lights. The music stopped feeling human. It became a machine built to print applause. For years, they coexisted like 2 planets sharing the same sky but never touching. At award shows, they smiled for the cameras. In private, there was silence. People in Nashville noticed. They whispered about the cold air between them. They said Willie skipped events when Garth was performing. He turned down collaborations, refused joint interviews, and ignored every invitation that came with Garth's name on it. Some called it pride. For Willie, it was protection. He was guarding something that Garth could never understand. Then came October 24th, 2004, the Country Music Hall of Fame. Garth stood under the lights, praising Willie Nelson as the conscience of country music. The audience rose to its feet. The applause rolled through the room like thunder. On camera, it looked like a perfect moment of respect. But backstage, the air was sharp and still. Willie walked up to him slowly. He looked straight into his eyes and said softly, "Next time, sing it like you mean it." 7 quiet words that cut deeper than any insult. By the next morning, every bar in Nashville was buzzing. Road crews, journalists, radio hosts, all repeating the same story. The outlaw had spoken. The industry felt the tremor. After that night, Willie made a silent vow. No more shared stages, no duets, no photographs. When someone mentioned Garth Brooks, he just smiled that small, tired smile and changed the subject. A man from his crew once said that over morning coffee, Willie murmured he built a kingdom out of country music but buried its heart in concrete. Years later, a young singer asked if he would ever forgive Garth. Willie just shook his head and said, "You cannot make country out of confetti," because for him, Brooks was not evil. He was empty, a monument made of noise and neon, a man who traded the dirt of truth for the glitter of fame. And long after the lights go out and the crowds go home, only one kind of song survives the kind that bleeds. That is why the first name on Willie Nelson's list will always be Garth Brooks, the showman he never trusted, the mirror of everything country music should never become. The second name on Willie Nelson's list was not a man, it was the woman who changed country music forever. Shania Twain, the queen of stadium lights, the artist who made country sound like pop, who sold more than 100 million records, and in the process, broke something inside the old outlaw who built the road she walked on. To the world, she was dazzling. To Willie, she was the proof that Nashville had traded heartbreak for choreography. He used to say that real country songs bleed. They smell like rain and cigarettes. But when he watched Shania perform, he saw glitter where there should have been scars. Her voice was beautiful, her shows immaculate, yet something was missing. The pain, the dirt, the truth. Their worlds collided in the late 1990s, when Shania's hits dominated every radio station from Texas to Toronto. Songs like "Man, I Feel Like a Woman" and "That Don't Impress Me" much were everywhere. They were catchy, polished, and unstoppable. Record labels called it evolution. Willie called it a warning. He once told his sound engineer that country is supposed to bleed, not sparkle. It was not bitterness, it was grief. Backstage at award shows, people could feel the quiet distance between them. Willie respected her success but mourned what her success meant. He saw a generation of singers trading soul for spectacle. For him, Shania represented a turning point. The night he realized country music was no longer a voice of the broken, but a brand for the beautiful. Then came the Country Music Association Awards. The year was 1999. Shania walked away with the title of Entertainer of the Year. She glowed under the spotlights, smiling, waving, while Willie sat a few rows behind her, his hands resting on his knees, face unreadable. The cameras caught him clapping politely, but when the lights dimmed, he leaned to a friend and said quietly, "Entertainer, maybe, but that ain't country." That moment became legend. A small sentence whispered backstage that split Nashville into two sides, the future and the past, and Willie, as always, chose the past, because to him, the past held truth. A few minutes later, Shania approached him with grace and confidence. She reached out to shake his hand. He nodded once, eyes cold and calm, and walked away. People called it arrogance. Willie called it honesty. He believed that art without pain is just decoration, and decoration never lasts. For years after that night, he avoided her name entirely. When journalists asked about Shania Twain, he would change the subject or laugh it off. But those close to him said the disappointment never really left. It was not personal, it was philosophical. He saw in her the moment when country stopped being a story and became a product. Even now, if someone plays one of her songs near him, he listens for a moment, then looks away, lost in thought. To most people, her music sounds joyful. To him, it sounds like a goodbye letter from the genre he once loved. Because in Willie Nelson's heart, country music was built on imperfection. It was born from struggle, not from spotlight. And Shania, for all her beauty and talent, reminded him that even legends can lose faith. That is why the second name on his list will always be Shania Twain, the queen who broke his faith, the woman who turned sorrow into sparkle, and left the outlaw watching his world change under 1,000 lights. The third name on Willie Nelson's list was not a rival. He was family. Waylon Jennings, the brother in music, in spirit, and in rebellion. Together they had built the outlaw movement. Two men standing against the polished machine of Nashville. Two voices fighting for freedom in a world that wanted them tamed. But somewhere along the road, that brotherhood cracked. And when it did, it broke something deep inside both of them. In the 1970s, They were unstoppable. Willie and Waylon. Their faces were painted on tour buses. Their songs filled every bar and truck stop across America. When people spoke their names, it was always together, like a single word, a single legend. But fame does strange things to brothers. It feeds the ego and starves the soul. And soon, jealousy began to whisper between the chords. By the late 1970s, Waylon was tired of being second. Every headline said Willie and Waylon, never Waylon and Willie. To outsiders, it seemed trivial, but in the fragile world of pride and pain, it was poison. He started showing up late to recording sessions, drinking harder, speaking sharper. People close to them said he would roll his eyes whenever someone called Willie the face of outlaw country. And Willie, quiet as always, said nothing. He simply watched his brother drift away. There was one night in the studio when the tension finally surfaced. Waylon slammed his guitar down and shouted that Willie was too stoned to play straight. Willie smiled, not in anger but in sadness. He said nothing, just picked up trigger and kept playing. But something inside him changed that night. He stopped trying to fix what fame had already ruined. The breaking point came a few years later, during a joint interview in the early 1980s. Reporters filled the room, cameras flashing, laughter bouncing off the walls. Waylon, half joking and half drunk, said that Willie was a hippie in cowboy boots who forgot where he came from. The room erupted with laughter, but Willie did not laugh. He stood, nodded politely, and walked out. He never called again. After that, silence took over. No calls, no letters, just two men driving different highways, pretending the road was not empty. Fans hoped they would reconcile. They never did. When Waylon passed away in 2002, Willie was performing in another state. He did not attend the funeral. Instead, he sent a bouquet of wildflowers in a small handwritten note that said, "See you on the road somewhere." Those 6 words carried everything he could not say. Forgiveness, grief, love, regret. It was not bitterness that kept him away. It was pain too old to heal. In the years that followed, Willie spoke of Waylon with quiet respect. He called him one of the real ones. He said the outlaw spirit they created together could never die. But even then, there was a shadow behind his smile, because he knew that no matter how many songs they wrote, no stage could ever bring back the brotherhood they lost. Sometimes during long bus rides, Willie would stare out the window at the endless highway, the hum of the tires like a heartbeat. People who traveled with him said he often whispered Waylon's name, not out of anger, but as if trying to speak to a ghost. He carried that silence like a scar, a reminder that fame gives everything and takes everything twice. Because in the end, Waylon Jennings was not an enemy. He was a mirror, the reflection of the road Willie chose, and the proof that even freedom can come with a cost. That is why the third name on Willie Nelson's list will always be Waylon Jennings, the brother who turned his back, the friend he could not forgive, and the ghost who still rides beside him somewhere out on the road. The 7th name on Willie Nelson's list came from a different world, a world of noise, rebellion, and swagger. Kid Rock, the wild one who called himself a country outlaw, but to Willie, he was only a storm without soul. Their paths crossed in the late 2000s, and what began as a promise of music ended as one of the ugliest nights of Willie's career. Willie had always believed that country could bend, but never break. He loved risk. He had played with rappers, bluesmen, even punk poets. He thought every sound had truth if played with heart. So when Kid Rock approached him in Nashville with an idea for a rebellious anthem, something raw and loud and untamed, Willie said yes. He saw a spark, a chance to mix chaos with meaning. He had no idea that spark would burn the whole room down. The meeting took place in a studio on Music Row. It was supposed to be a quiet evening session. Willie arrived early, guitar in hand, lyrics already written. He imagined a song about real rebellion, about how music could still fight for honesty in a world run by money. But when Kid Rock finally walked in, almost 2 hours late, he was holding a beer, not a notebook. Behind him came the smell of smoke, laughter, and arrogance. Witnesses say the energy shifted the moment he entered. He blasted his own songs through the speakers, laughed too loud, and told the engineers to turn everything up. He called it art. Willie called it noise. Still, the old outlaw stayed calm. He believed in patience. He believed that somewhere in the chaos, the truth might still show up. They started recording. Willie strummed softly, his voice steady, gentle as the road itself. Kid Rock interrupted, shouting for more drums, more guitars, more distortion. He wanted the song to explode. Willie wanted it to breathe. The tension grew thicker with every note. Then Kid Rock leaned back in his chair and said with a grin, "Come on, old man, loosen up." Everyone in the room froze. Willie looked at him for a long second. Then he placed his guitar down, took off his headphones, and quietly walked out the door. No words, no anger, just silence heavy enough to crush the air. The session ended there. The song was never finished, never released. By morning, the story had spread across Nashville. Some called it a clash of generations. Others said it was pride. But those who knew Willie understood. He did not walk out because of an insult. He walked out because he realized something far worse. The man sitting across from him did not care about the music at all. When a reporter later asked about the collaboration, Willie simply said that some fires are better left unlit. And that was all he ever said. He never spoke to Kid Rock again. Every invitation that came later went unanswered. For Willie, that night was not a fight. It was a lesson. That rebellion without respect is just noise. That being wild does not make you free. It only makes you lost. And that is why the seventh name on Willie Nelson's list will always be Kid Rock, the wild one who crossed the line, the man who mistook chaos for truth, and the echo Willie left behind in the quiet of an empty studio. The fifth name on Willie Nelson's list was not a stranger. He was a brother in spirit, a partner in rebellion, a man who shared the same dusty highways and the same smoky bars. Merle Haggard, the poet of the working man, the one who sang about prisons and freedom with the same breath. For decades, they rode side by side, writing songs that turned pain into poetry. But even the closest brothers can bleed each other dry. And one careless moment on stage would turn that bond into silence. In the 1970s and 80s, Willie and Merle were the beating heart of outlaw country. They were the proof that Nashville could not own everyone. They toured together, slept on the same buses, and wrote songs that told the truth in a way the industry had forgotten. Their friendship was built on nights of whiskey and words, on trust that few men ever find. Willie once said that Merle was one of the few people who could outplay him and outdrink him in the same night. They were brothers in everything except blood, but fame always has a way of testing loyalty. By the late 1990s, their careers had taken different paths. Merle's humor had turned sharper, his patience thinner. He started making jokes during interviews about Willie's marijuana activism. At first, it was harmless. The two men had always teased each other. But over time, the jokes turned into jabs. And then one night, the line was crossed. It happened during a live performance, a charity show in front of thousands of fans. Merle took the microphone, smiled, and said that weed was a lazy man's crutch. The crowd laughed. Willie did not. He stood there with trigger in his hands, his face calm, his eyes empty. He played through the rest of the song without saying a word. When the lights went down, he walked straight off the stage, out the back door, and onto his bus. He never spoke to Merle that night. He never needed to. The silence said everything. Behind the scenes, the damage spread fast. A joint album they had been planning quietly disappeared from the schedule. Managers stopped calling. Crew members whispered that something sacred had snapped. Fans hoped it was only temporary. It was not. For Willie, it was not about the joke. It was about respect. Merle had mocked the thing that had kept Willie alive through pain and prison and loss. He had turned belief into a punchline. Years later, Merle tried to make peace. He sent messages through mutual friends. He told interviewers that he missed the old days. Willie never answered. When asked about it, he simply said, "Some things you do not joke about." That was his rule. Forgiveness was possible, but forgetting was not. And in that silence lived the memory of every night they had spent chasing the same dream. He still played Merle's songs sometimes, but never the ones they had written together. Those songs, he said once, belonged to another lifetime. When Merle Haggard passed away in 2016, Willie called him one of the greats. The words were kind, but they were careful. He did not say my best friend. He did not say my brother, because the truth was heavier than grief. He had loved Merle too much to lie about what was lost. Even now, when old footage plays of the two of them singing side by side, Willie will sometimes watch for a few seconds, then reach out and lower the volume. It is not anger anymore. It is memory. And in that memory, Merle Haggard remains what he always was to him, a legend, a lesson, and the friend who crossed the line. That is why the fifth name on Willie Nelson's list will always belong to Merle Haggard, the man who once shared his stage, his laughter, and his silence. The sixth name on Willie Nelson's list was the one that hurt the most, not because of betrayal, but because of disappointment. Kris Kristofferson, the poet, the soldier, the songwriter who could turn sorrow into scripture. He and Willie had shared more than stages. They had shared faith in the same fragile thing, the belief that music could still tell the truth. For 40 years, they walked the same road, brothers bound by rhythm and whiskey, and then one careless sentence ended it all. They met in the 1960s when country music was still a battlefield between rebels and rules. Kris was the scholar with the gravel voice, a man who left the army, swept floors in studios, and wrote songs that outlived the men who sang them. Willie saw in him something sacred, a soul that understood. That art was a kind of honesty. Together they wrote, sang, and drank until sunrise. When they stood on stage, it felt like time stopped. Two men, two guitars, one truth. Through decades of fame and failure, they stayed close. When others fell away, Kris stayed. When critics doubted, he defended Willie. He was more than a friend. He was family chosen by music. But words, like bullets, do not always hit where they are aimed. The moment came during a private fundraiser in the mid-2000s. The room was full of songwriters, journalists, and whiskey glasses half empty. Willie had just finished a quiet ballad about farmers and forgotten soldiers. He walked off the small stage to applause that felt sincere. And then Kris, half smiling and half drunk, said to the group around him that Willie had become more of a mascot than a musician. Laughter followed. Not cruel, just careless. But Willie heard it. He stopped in the doorway, eyes still, expression unreadable. Then he turned and walked out into the night. The next morning, his assistant canceled their upcoming sessions. Calls went unanswered. Messages were ignored. For the first time in 4 decades, silence stood between them. People around them tried to fix it. They said it was just a joke, that Kris never meant harm. But Willie never believed in harmless words. He always said that words could stain deeper than scars. And this one had left a mark. For years after that night, the story lived quietly in Nashville. They would sometimes end up in the same building, the same award show, the same tribute, but they never spoke. Kris tried once to apologize through a mutual friend. Willie refused. He said that some bridges do not burn in fire. They drown in silence. And silence was what he chose. When journalists asked about it, he never attacked. He simply said that sometimes words do not fade, they stay. It was not bitterness. It was sadness for what used to be real. Because no matter how many songs they wrote, or how many legends they became, the truth was simple trust. Once cracked, never fits the same again. Years later, during a quiet interview on the road, Willie was asked what friendship meant to him. He smiled softly and said that friendship is when you can hear someone's silence and still understand what they mean. Then he looked away, as if remembering something he wished he could forget. That is why the sixth name on Willie Nelson's list will always be Kris Kristofferson, the man whose words cut deeper than any knife, the brother who never meant to wound, and the proof that even the strongest bond can break under the weight of a single careless line. The seventh name on Willie Nelson's list came from a world far from Texas dust and broken guitars. Kid Rock, the wild one who tried to wear the outlaw crown without earning the scars. The man who blended rap, rock, and country into a storm of noise and swagger. He called himself a rebel, but to Willie, he was just another performer mistaking chaos for truth. Their story began as a chance for something new and ended as the night Willie walked out of his own studio. In the year 2008, Nashville was restless. Country music was changing again, chasing the youth, chasing the money. Kid Rock wanted to be part of it. He had the fame, the attitude, the loudness. But what he wanted was credibility. And no one carried more of that than Willie Nelson. So he reached out. He wanted to make a song together, something wild and raw, a mix of Southern rebellion and country soul. Willie, always open to new ideas, said yes. He believed in bridges. He believed that truth could exist even inside noise. He believed wrong. The session was set for a small studio on Music Row. Willie arrived early, guitar in hand, words scribbled on paper. He was ready to create something honest, a song about rebellion that meant something. He tuned trigger, lit a quiet cigarette, and waited. An hour passed, then two. When Kid Rock finally arrived, he was carrying a beer, not a guitar. Behind him came the echo of laughter, the smell of smoke, and a crowd of friends who thought they were at a party. From the first moment, the energy was off. Willie's calm was a whisper against the hurricane that had just walked in. Kid Rock turned the studio into a carnival. He blasted his own songs through the speakers, shouting that they should make the track louder, dirtier, faster. He called it freedom. Willie called it noise. Still, the old outlaw stayed patient. He had faced worse storms than this. He believed maybe the music could still find its way through the chaos. They started to record. Willie strummed soft and steady, his voice low and full of road dust. Kid Rock laughed, shouting for more guitars, more distortion, more everything. He wanted fireworks. Willie wanted truth. Then came the line that ended everything. Kid Rock leaned back in his chair, smirked, and said, "Come on, old man, loosen up." The room fell silent. Willie looked at him for a long moment. Then he set his guitar down, took off his headphones, and walked out the door. No shouting, no explanation, just quiet steps that felt heavier than anger. The session died that night. The song was never finished. By the next morning, Nashville was whispering. Producers called it ego. Musicians called it pride. But those who knew Willie understood. He did not leave because of an insult. He left because he realized the man across from him did not care about music at all. The stage, the sound, the rebellion, it was all costume. There was no truth behind the noise. When a reporter later asked him about Kid Rock, Willie simply said that some fires are better left unlit. That one sentence closed the door forever. He never spoke to him again. Every invitation that came afterward was ignored. To Willie, the matter was done. There was no hate, just silence. The kind that comes when something dies without a sound. Years later, people still ask why he walked out. He never explains. He only smiles and changes the subject. Because to Willie Nelson, rebellion without respect is just vanity, and music without soul is only volume. That is why the seventh and final name on his list will always be Kid Rock. The wild one who crossed the line, the man who mistook noise for art, and the reminder that not every outlaw carries a truth worth singing. When the lights fade and the music stops, one truth remains. Every name on Willie Nelson's list was more than a memory. It was a lesson about honesty, loyalty, and the price of staying true. He did not live to please everyone. He lived to protect what was real. And sometimes protecting the truth means standing alone. Looking at his story, we learn that even legends are human. They feel hurt, they feel betrayal, and they carry silence the way others carry scars. Willie never shouted his pain. He simply turned it into music and let the songs speak for him. That is the power of a man who chooses truth over comfort. He showed us that forgiveness has limits. Not every wound can be healed. Not every friendship can survive fame or pride, but walking away does not mean bitterness. It can also mean peace. Willie believed that respect is not something you demand. It is something you live by. If you lose it, no applause can bring it back. In a world where everyone is chasing attention, he chose silence over spectacle. He taught us that sometimes the quietest voices are the ones that last the longest. You do not need to shout to make a point. You only need to live your truth, even when no one is watching. Maybe that is the real message of this story. Stay loyal to what matters, protect your peace, and remember that strength is not about how loud you fight, but how calmly you stand your ground. Willie Nelson is over 90 years old now. He has outlived most of the people who once doubted him, and yet he never lost his kindness. He still believes that music is only real when it bleeds, that love means nothing without honesty. As this video ends, take a moment for yourself. Think about your own life, your own list of people and lessons. Which ones helped you grow, and which ones taught you when to walk away? Hold on to the lessons. Let go of the noise. And before you leave, tell me one thing. What time is it where you are right now? Are you watching this late at night or early in the morning? Type your answer in the comments below. And if this story touched you, subscribe to the channel and stay with us, because every legend carries a truth worth hearing. And maybe tonight, that truth found you. Found you. Found you. Found you.